Hello my friends, Paul here at RoJoBe Music, and welcome to part 4 of the Yamaha FG300A refurbishment. Okay, so what have we done so far? Removed the old strings and removed the tuners, and I've adjusted the neck with the truss rod adjustment because it was angled back. We had a back bow, which is not what you want on any guitar. At the very least, you want the fretboard to be dead straight. And if you have any kind of bow at all, then you ideally want underbow. That's obviously exaggerated, but that direction, but only a very, very tiny amount. So I've adjusted the neck so that the neck is straight at the moment. Now obviously under string tension, full set of strings, that's likely to put a slight underbow in the neck. Flies. Which is exactly what you want, as I said. But we won't know if that needs any further adjustment until we've got all the strings on up to full tension. Then obviously I'll check it again. So I've done a light fret leveling on this guitar, and recrowned the frets and redressed the ends where they come over the edge of the fretboard, and that's all nice now. And boiled linseed oil on the fretboard. I've actually today is Wednesday, so I did all that work on Monday. And I did say then that I wasn't sure if the fretboard would need another coat of boiled linseed oil. Normally they don't, normally one is plenty. But this one was pretty dry. I suspect that the fretboard hasn't been oiled for years, if not decades, on this guitar. So this morning I've given it just another layer of boiled linseed oil and wiped off the excess, and you can probably see it looks pretty good now. Much better than it was. So I also cleaned up the ferrules in the headstock and lightly cleaned the tuners. Didn't de-rust them or polish them or anything like that, because I want them to still look old, have that patina. The other thing I've done is I've completely cleaned the guitar. Not sure how well you can see it now, and if you remember what it was like before, it was pretty nasty. Had lots of DNA all over it, particularly up here. There was a big dark stain here from obviously, sorry, the other way, this way, big dark stain up here, and you can see where I cleaned it off, it's actually affected the finish a little bit. And also all across here there was lots of DNA and grime. So I cleaned it up with warm water and a soft cloth and just rubbed all the grime off. You don't want to use detergent on guitars, so not even mild soap, because obviously in that kind of thing there is enzymes to break down grease and grime, which will obviously work perfectly well to clean the guitar, but over time it might affect the finish. It could cause fading or cracking of the finish, and particularly on an older guitar. This is about 30 years old. You'd have to be careful with that. And also there is quite a lot of exposed wood around the edges, and you certainly wouldn't want to get any detergents in there, because it could do some damage to the wood over time. So just warm water and a soft cloth, and just wiped over the whole guitar, cleaned it all up, and I also polished it. Now what I use, to polish guitars it's actually my own mixture, and what it is 50% beeswax and 50% boiled linseed oil. Gives a really nice finish. So you use it just excuse me, just the same as any other polish. You rub it in and then you wipe it off, and it's a good idea not to leave it on too long. So you do small sections at a time, give it a good rub, then take a clean cloth and wipe it off, and it polishes up lovely. I've also I've made a nut, well, not made a nut, but I've shaped a nut and a saddle so that they fit on the guitar. They still need some refining, but mostly about height, which I won't know until I've got the guitar strung up, and we can check the string action. So we are at the stage now, really, of starting to put it back together. I am going to finish this guitar today. It could well go into 2 videos, mostly because of the work that's required on the nut and the saddle to get the height right. That can be very time consuming, because you have to put the nut and the saddle on the guitar, put the strings on, get them up to some kind of tension, check the action, and if it's if it needs adjusting, you've got to loosen the strings, take them out again, make the adjustments, whether it's a shim to raise them up or a little bit of shaving or sanding to lower them. And that can be quite time consuming. So the nut is is shaped and ready to go in, and it seems to be pretty much perfect. May or may not need to adjust the height on the nut, I'm not sure yet. And the saddle is shaped and fitting nicely in the bridge. Now, from my experience with Yamaha guitars, that saddle does look quite high, so that probably will need to be taken down, but I'm not sure yet. For some reason, the saddles on Yamaha guitars do seem to be set very low. This one was set considerably higher than I've seen before on Yamahas, and I think that's mostly because of the back bow in the neck. So obviously, if you've got too much back bow, you're going to get buzzing on the strings kind of in the center of the board. So they probably raised that saddle up to bring the strings up off the fretboard, not realizing that all they needed to do was straighten the neck. A lot of people don't really understand properly what the truss rod is for and how to use it. It's a very simple concept, really. The truss rod is just a metal bar that goes through the neck, and if you tighten it, you bring the neck back this way. The truss rod is designed to pull the neck back if you tighten it. And if you loosen it, it releases that pressure and allows it to straighten and eventually start to boat upwards. Pretty simple concept, really, but a lot of people don't really understand how truss rods work. So for some reason they had this tightened up all the way, so the neck had back bow, which is absolutely not what you want. So, first things first. Okay, so what we're going to do first is I'm actually going to attach the nut in place. I was going to loose fit it for now, but the problem with that is it moves around and you can't get a proper reading. So all I'm going to do is just put a little drop of super glue into the nut slot and glue it in place. I mean, that's what you do anyway. You don't want to smother it in super glue and really stick it down, because if it needs to come off at any time, you want it to come off fairly easily, but at the same time you don't want it to move around during play, etc. I mean, as some of you will have seen in the previous video on this project, when I removed the nut, I just got a chisel and a hammer and just lightly tapped against the nut in this direction, light tap, and eventually it just comes away. So that's how you want it. You want it to be stuck down so it doesn't move, but you want it to be quite easily removable. So I'm going to fit the nut first, then I'm going to put the tuners on. because we need to start, you know, getting this thing, you know, ready to use. So first of all, a little drop of super glue. Can I bring you in a bit closer? Okay, so just a small drop of super glue in the slot where the nut's going to go. That should be plenty. Okay, so I've got to make sure I get it lined up and pressed firmly in. Okay, so that should take 10 or 20 seconds to set up. The ends feel perfect. There's no overlap or underlap, if that's a thing. It's fitted in the slot nicely. Yep, all looks good. Okay. Well, that didn't work. Okay. Right. Let's try again. This time I'm going to put a little dab of glue on the nut itself and on the side rather than the bottom, and that should sort us out. Maybe I didn't quite give the glue long enough to set up, but usually super glue is pretty fast, so shouldn't have been an issue. Pretty good. Okay, I've got a feeling this is not working for some reason. Usually it's not a problem. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be making good contact. I think that's the problem. So I'm going to tip the guitar up, and then I'm going to run a little drop of glue in this side so that it wicks down inside, and that should solve the problem. Might want to see what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm just going to drop a little bit of glue down in here carefully so that it doesn't get all over the headstock as well. And as I said, that should solve the problem. The only problem with it is that it might be a little bit too much glue in there, which could make it difficult to remove the next time it needs to be, if at all. Okay, that should be plenty. And there's no glue on the headstock, so that's fantastic. A bit of reinforcement. Okay, right, that's done the trick. Beautiful. Okay, so that nut's in there now, nice and solid. That's not going anywhere, but I didn't use too much glue, so it will come out easily if necessary. But if I set this guitar up properly, which I intend to do, there shouldn't be any need to remove or change that nut, you know, for the next 30 years, provided it's looked after. So it doesn't really need to come out, but should it ever need to in the future, you want it to be fairly easy to remove. So again, it'd be the same thing. Oh, excuse me. Put a chisel or blunt screwdriver against the inside of the nut, just give it a little tap and it will come away, no problem. Okay, that's perfect. So now I'm going to refit the tuners. Let's just move this along a little bit. I'm almost going off the end of my bench here. Okay. So, time to refit the tuners. One thing I need to get, I'll just pause for a second and I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, so that again was a mere second for you. I just had to go and get something. Just glue. Okay, so got the guitar turned over and it's time to start refitting the tuners. Let's just bring you around a little bit. So actually when I cleaned these tuners up, I removed all the pencil mark numbers that I'd put on the tuners, so they may or may not go back in the same order, but it really doesn't matter that much. I'm just a little bit pedantic about those things sometimes, but let's see. They all line up perfectly, the screw holes line up, so it's not a problem. Now, because the guitar itself is quite old, the tuners are quite old, the screws that holding the tuners in are quite old, I'm not overly worried, but a little concerned that the screws that hold the tuners into the headstock may come loose, they may vibrate loose. I mean, the holes look absolutely perfect, to be honest. There's no blowing out of any of the holes or anything like that, no chipping. They all look fine. But what I am going to do is just take a little bit of wood glue on the end of a toothpick and just dab a little bit of wood glue into each of the holes. That way, when I do the screws up, they will hold in place. They won't vibrate loose. And yet, at the same time, they'll still be easy enough to remove, you know, should they need to be. I'm not going to use super glue because that would, you know, they would be held in place permanently. So just a little dab of wood glue, just to hold them firm, but if they need to be removed, they will still come out easily. Okay, so let's see. A little bit of glue on the end of a toothpick. And of course on camera it doesn't work, there we go. Literally just a tiny drop in each hole. Okay, that's one. Two, I didn't quite go in. I mean, I'm barely putting any in at all, but it's just the slightest smear, really. Hardly anything at all. I don't want them to be held solid, but held firm. Okay, so let's start to get the first one in. Okay, 2 screws. Can you see me all right? Yes, you can. Okay. So I'll just put the first screw in loosely and then put the other one in just to make sure everything lines up before I tighten them down. Okay, that's good. Number 1. There we go. Okay, number 2. This is always quite a satisfying part of any job when you're starting to put things back together. The home straight, as it were. As I said, there's still a fair bit of work to do with the nut and the saddle. Well, there may or may not be. I'm not sure until I get it strung up. Okay, next one. Okay, last screw for this side. Good, they went in absolutely perfectly, no problems at all. Not that I was expecting anything, but... Okay, so that's one side done. I'm not going to film the other side because it's exactly the same and I'm just wasting video time. So I'm going to pause the video here, get the rest of those tuners in, and after that we'll be ready to put some strings on and start to check the string height at both the nut and the saddle end. Okay, so I'll bring you back in 1 second. Okay, so I've got all the tuners on now. I've actually skipped ahead a little bit. Now what I've done is I've put two strings on already, the outer two strings, so the bass E and the treble E. I haven't got them up to tension. I've literally just attached the tuners and lightly put these two strings in so that we can start to see where we are with string height. And I can already see that it's very high at the nut, way too high at the nut, and it's looking as though it's going to be too high at the saddle as well. So I will need to make some adjustments. So at the nut end I'll be filing the grooves down a little bit, and the saddle end I'll have to take the saddle out and shave a little bit off the bottom. Now really, ideally what you need to do this job properly, you do really need to have all 6 strings on and pretty much up to tension, because then you know how much the neck is going to be bowing under the tension of the strings, and you can get a more accurate reading of the string height at both the nut and the saddle. But I'm going to do it initially just with the 2 strings and make the adjustments with those, which is going to get me, you know, close or very close to where I need to be. So if I just make the adjustments with just the 2 strings on, get those as close as possible to, you know, to the correct string action, then when I put all 6 strings on and get them up to tension, that might change a little bit, but it's going to be very, very fractional. So if I get them close enough at this stage, I may not need to do any further adjustment, and even if I do, it's going to be a tiny, tiny amount. The biggest problem is time. You know, if I've got all 6 strings on and I've got to make adjustments to the saddle, I've got to get the strings up to tension, check the string height. If the saddle needs adjusting, I've got to loosen up all the strings, basically take them out so I can get the saddle back out, make the adjustment to the saddle, put the saddle back in, get all the strings back in, tune it, get it all tensioned up again, and check it again. So as you can figure out, that's pretty time consuming. So I can save myself and the customer a bit of time, although as I said, I've already, you know, priced this job, completely outpriced myself. So it will just save a bit of time doing it this way, get as close as possible to where I need to be, then put all 6 strings on, tension it up, check it again, and see where we're at. Okay, so I'm running out of video time, so let's get these strings up to, I'm not going to take them right up to normal tension. I'm going to take them, I mean these are the E strings, I'm going to take them both up to a D, a step lower. And also I've changed my mind about what strings are going on. I'm now fitting these, still the same brand, D'Addario, but it turned out the other ones I had were actually electric guitar strings, so just as well I checked before opening them. So these are, and I noticed, I thought, because those strings, the gauges were 10 to 46, I thought, that's electric guitar range, that's not acoustic guitar. And it didn't actually say on the packaging anywhere whether it was acoustic or electric, and I thought, well, they must be electric. And I googled it, and sure enough they were. So these ones are definitely acoustic guitar strings, and these are gauged 12 to 54, which is pretty close to the standard strings that are fitted to Yamahas. They're 1253s. These are 1254s, so they're close enough. Okay, so let's get the strings up to almost pitch. Okay, that's a D. Oh, that's too high. Okay, so I've got both strings more or less up to a D. which is one step lower than the normal tuning for a guitar. Okay, so first I'm going to check the string action at the nut, which is definitely too high. It's not too bad, it's not far off, but that can definitely come down a little bit. And the string action at the 12th fret here will tell me whether we're too high or too low at the saddle. So it should be no more than 3mm for the bass string and 2mm for the for the treble string. That's still pretty high, but that's your absolute maximum. So on the bass we're, wow, almost 4mm. So the saddle's going to have to come down a way. Treble, we're at about 3mm. Okay, so I'll have to make the adjustment to the nut first to get that settled, and then I've got to end this video here. Then I'll make the adjustments to the saddle. So thank you all very much for watching, and look forward to the next video. In the meantime, peace out.